Well, shalom, everybody. My name is Harold Lapidus, and welcome to the Boston Herald podcast. Our very special guest today is Mr. Louie Kemp. To those outside the rock music world, Mr. Kemp is known for his fish business, which was one of the most successful seafood operations in the country. I still remember seeing it in the supermarket. To music fans, the name Louie Kemp is most associated with Bob Dylan. Their friendship began when they went to a summer camp together in 1953, back when Bob was known as Bobby Zimmerman. Among other things, Dylan was the best man at Mr. Kemp's wedding, and he managed the Rolling Thunder Revue tours of the mid-'70s. Back in 2019, he published his memoir, Dylan and Me, 50 Years of Adventures. And if you go to his website, dylanandme.com, and order an autographed book, there's a special offer there, and you can also get it from Amazon and the usual places. So, shalom, Mr. Kemp. How are you?
I'm fine, Harold. Thank you.
How are you handling things during the pandemic?
Begrudgingly, I'm under protest about this whole thing. I'm not happy about it. Of course, neither is anybody else. But I'm not used to having all my freedoms taken away. So I'm a bit of a nonconformist. So I go out quite a bit, but I do it with caution and precaution. And I go to the park. I walk every day, or I go hiking and drive around in my car. Just to get out there.
Anyway, so I loved your book, and it's essential reading for any Dylanologist wanting to know anything about the real Bob Dylan. I remember a couple of people being concerned that what might be contained in the book, but it's unsurprisingly written with a lot of love and respect. And I was rereading it today to refamiliarize it with myself, and it's a great insight into Bob Dylan and Bobby Zimmerman, and not as the Nobel laureate Hall of Fame singer-songwriter, but as a human being, and which is something I try to get across in my writing. So Dylan's love-hate relationship with fame is something I would imagine he's shared with you.
Wow. Is that a question?
Yeah. It's a statement. It's an ellipsis at the end.
We never really talk about that. I mean, first of all, I got to clarify that my friend isn't Bob Dylan, it's Bobby Zimmerman. Mm-hmm. And that's who it's always been. I mean, he's Bob Dylan when he's on stage and doing his professional thing, but when he's with his friends or family, he's Bobby Zimmerman, and that's who I know.
I think I first heard about the book from Kingy Friedman, who participated in the second Rolling Thunder Revue, and yes. He was being interviewed on Sirius XM. And I know he wrote the foreword, and he's featured in the main text, but did he help in any other ways?
Yeah, so Kinky edited the first 5 chapters for me, but there's 25 chapters, and he was so busy with his own career at that time that he really couldn't do the rest of them. So, but he did, like you say, he did the foreword, and he did edit the first 5, and after that, I got a professional editor to work with me to finish the rest of the chapters.
In the interview I heard, Kinky said, if Dylan likes it, great. If he doesn't, that's better.
Oh, that's very kinky is, right?
Have you heard anything from Mr. Zimmerman about the book?
No, I sent him the book, and I have not heard. So, in kinky style, I would say no news is good news, right?
All right, so let's go back to your beginning. You honored both your mother and your father in your book. Your mother is responsible for your early employment, and she's the reason you don't smoke. Did you want to talk about that?
Yeah, my mother was both my parents are a big influence on me, but my mother was was really a hands-on mother. I mean, she the story, like you say, the smoking story in the book, that it stopped me at a very early age from ever smoking by having a smoking party. But she was hands-on all the way. She came on Rolling Thunder a few times, and just like Bob's mother did too. Bobby's mother came. So it was pretty much a family affair for us as well, you know. And there's other stories in the book about my parents and how they influenced me, and I refer anybody the opportunity to read them there if they're interested.
And your and there was, there's a great story about your father in boxing, and I love this quote that you had: "If Muhammad Ali could float like a butterfly and sting like a bee, you could dance like Michael Jackson and hit like a frozen mackerel."
Right.
But he was the one with the fish business, which you inherited,
Yes.
and you expanded it. Can you explain a little bit about what you inherited and what you did to get it to Japan and other places?
Yes. So I had been working with my dad for 2 years when he passed away unexpectedly. At 57 years old, and I was 25 at that time. And he had trained me, so I was pretty well trained for what we had there. And I took it over successfully and kept it going. And then I expanded it up into Alaska and was able to make a much larger company. And we're processing salmon and herring and cod, pollock up in Alaska. And I also put together a manufacturing plant in Duluth to make imitation crab, and which turned out to be the largest imitation crab companies in the United States. That's the company that you saw the product in the stores, in thousands of stores all over the country, still under the name of LOUIE Kemp Seafood Company. So I was, with the grace of God, I had, great success in growing our business into much larger proportions.
And then after that, eventually you expanded to Japan.
Yeah, well, what I did Japanese-wise is I basically sold all the product that I produced in Alaska, which was big volume, 10, 12 million pounds of salmon a year, 10, 15 million pounds of herring a year, ikura, pollock, all kinds of things. And that was my market. So I used to go to Japan every year to see my customers over there. And that's where I learned about surimi, which is the technology by which imitation crab is made. And so I brought that to America.
And some of that information or the things you learned came in handy when you became a promoter later on. So when I was just wondering, because this, I was wondering what it was like a kid growing up in Minnesota in the I guess 40s and 50s. I mean, what did you do for fun? What memories do you have?
Northern Minnesota is where Bobby and I grew up, which is quite a bit different than the Twin Cities, the major metropolitan area. Northern Minnesota, very outdoorsy, very hardy people, hardworking, honest, decent people. I mean, all the people in Minnesota are decent, honest people, but up north it was just a more physical crowd, I would say. A lot of more. We had a steel mill in Duluth. They had mines on Iron Range. I mean, people that worked with their hands. And so it was good. The values that we learned there, the lifestyle, they pretty well prepared us for life in an honest, decent way that we both carried forward with us after we left there.
And so you met Bobby Zimmerman at Herzl Camp in northern Wisconsin. You were 11, he was 12. First of all, can you describe the camp? I mean, what was it like? I mean, what did you guys do when you weren't goofing around and getting into trouble and playing music? Was that all you did?
No. We chased girls too. The good news about that camp is it was a co-educational camp. So, there was girls there. That kept us coming back for 5 years in a row. A lot of summer romances, and it was a very a formative time in our lives, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. So we grew and we learned, and it was a Jewish camp that had, very good values that we learned as well. There was an Orthodox rabbi who was the camp director, so gives you an idea, of what it was like. And we grew there, but we were kind of the mavericks and the non-contrarians. Very often, they had a whole schedule for us every day. You get up, you go, you go have your breakfast, and here's where you go at such and such time, and all these activities. Sometimes we didn't want to go, and we just didn't go, And of course, we get in trouble for that. But that's who we were, and that's how we were there as well. But we grew there, we matured there, and we learned a lot there.
Did you do things like davening every morning and tefillin and all that sort of stuff?
No, they didn't do that, but they did. We would sing Hebrew songs. Uh, there would be some. On Shabbos we would daven. And on Shabbos, the Sabbath, we'd wear what they call the Shabbos whites. You had to come to camp with Shabbos whites, which was white pants and white shirt. And on Shabbos, that's what you would wear. So they set the spirit there for
that. And you and Bob were both close friends with Larry Keegan, and he could be seen in the Rolling Thunder film that Martin Scorsese just did, singing a song with Dylan, a Hank Williams song, and it's quite a story. But you guys were thick as thieves, I guess, when you were very young.
Oh yeah, well, we stayed close throughout Larry's life. The three of us, were in the same cabin together the first year, and we all hit it off, and I have the one story in there about the shaving, how we raided the next cabin with shaving cream, basically stole the consort's car, and we got a lot of trouble. But, we hit it off, and we stayed close throughout life. When Larry was 16, he had a tragic diving accident in Florida, and he became paralyzed and quadriplegic, and but that didn't change our friendship or relationship.
And one of the things you wrote in the book is you guys were close to being juvenile delinquents, and there's actually a group of Dylan fans called Dylan, like if you change the first 5 letters to Dylan's, Dylan Quints. Can't even say it. It's a visual thing, but Dylan Quints instead of delinquents. But as you just said, you guys would get yourself into trouble or try to stay out of trouble. And as you said, and some of that stuff, I guess, continued in the Rolling Thunder tour when you talked about Bob wanting to drive in the middle of the night when he probably shouldn't be behind the wheel.
Yeah, well, Bob, we all know Bob's a free spirit, and that he always was, and is, and always will be, I'm sure.
And so there was a talent night, and you and Bob performed a song called "Annie Had a Baby," and I guess that was quite, racy for its time. And I think later on you wrote about some other even more racy songs he did. So it sounds like even then he was ready to, and I guess you too were ready to shock people or push the envelope or do something that maybe society, in the squares didn't get into.
Yeah, he was always very progressive. Him and Larry were both very musically inclined. Not me, but they knew all the popular artists of the day, and they knew all the same songs. And Larry was a singer as well, and so they collaborated at camp singing songs together. So it was fitting that, and Larry throughout his life, even after he became wheelchair bound, would travel around performing and singing and writing songs. And so those two had that in common for their whole life.
And in the book, you describe Bobby Zimmerman as being very popular at the camp, but you were the only one who really saw him, believed in him as being someone who would attain the success that he eventually achieved. So, what do you think it was that you saw in him?
Well, it was that unbelievable determination. I mean, there was no question that he was determined to become successful in music, a rock and roll star, as he would say over and over again. So it was based on that determination that I figured he'd make it happen on some level. And of course, whoever could imagine, the heights that he would soar to, but he went way beyond where he said he was even going to go. But yeah, it was that determination that I figured would get him some success in that field.
So the Zimmerman family moved to Hibbing when he was about 6 years old. You wrote in the book, and that's about 75 miles from Duluth. And yet he would visit you on weekends and stay with you at times. First of all, how did he get there? I mean, did he take a train or did he hitch or did he?
No, there was no trains. Interestingly enough, as a sidebar, I'll tell you this, and your listeners, they might find this interesting. The Greyhound bus started in Hibbing, Minnesota. The whole Greyhound bus started in Hibbing. And its first run, this huge company that later became, transportation for the whole country, long before, jet planes and all that stuff, and the interstate highway system even, started on Iron Range in Hibbing. The guy's name was Andy Anderson, who started it. And he started by going, I think, from Hibbing to Virginia, which is another range city. But then his first big route out of the range was at a route that went from Hibbing to Duluth. And then they just kept going, of course. So sometimes he would take the Greyhound down, but very often there would be people in the community up there that were coming to Duluth for the weekend, Duluth being the big city if you lived up on Iron Range. And so, one way or another, he'd get a ride.
And so if he came to visit you during the weekend, and what would you guys get up to?
Oh, no good. No, I mean, we were active. I mean, if it was the winter, I lived across the street from a park, and we would, we'd go sledding, and Duluth is built on hills. So the park, had, you could start at the top of the park and just, if you had a sled, then it was the winter, you slide down to the bottom of the park like a block long or so. Stuff like that. It was the summer we played, football, baseball in the park, all kinds of stuff. So there's all kinds of activities, a lot of neighborhood kids. So there's a lot going on, and then at night, of course, sometimes we played board games, chess, or what's the other game we played? Of course, checkers, whatever was going on in the day, and, we just kept busy, and Duluth was, 100,000 people, so there was things to do. We'd go hang out in the local drive-in, but the one of the big things, and this I talk about in the book a little bit, is back then in the 50s, because we were young, we couldn't go to, we weren't old enough to go to bars or anything like that. Kids would have open houses. An open house was, one of the kids would say we're at the London Inn drive-in hanging out, the hamburger joint, and a lot of the kids would congregate. It was a social thing, and one of the kids, very often the girls would say, let's go back to my house and we can go, because after a while they want to kick us out of the drive-in because they want to make room for new customers to come in. After you stay there an hour and a half, they get upset with you taking their parking spots. So one of the one kid was at school to my house for an open house. So open houses were very popular back then, and very often these houses always had pianos in them, and so we'd go there, and as soon as Bobby would see a piano, he'd go right to it, and he'd start playing and singing, and inevitably we'd get kicked out because these pianos were meant for 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 classic music or Mozart or something, highbrow stuff. And when all of a sudden Bobby would start pounding on the piano singing Jerry Lee Lewis, the parents would come out of the other room and be horrified, and we'd get the axe.
On Christmas Eve, 1956, that was Bobby Zimmerman's first recording, and you write about this in the book. And he did some oldies, although they weren't really oldies at the time. And then I guess it produced a 78 RPM piece of vinyl. Can you picture what that room was like? What it was like to whatever that recording session thing atmosphere was like, or the equipment or anything like that?
Well, see, I wasn't there. It was Larry,
Oh,
Bobby, and another fellow, I think it was Howie Rutman, and they were in downtown St. Paul, and and there was a music store that had like a little recording booth in it,
ah,
and that's what it was like, So you could go in this recording booth. Can't remember how much he told me. I think Larry paid for it. He said it was $5. Well, $5 is a lot of money in 1956. And so they went in this recording booth and made this record. So most of what I know about is from what Larry told me. And then years later, Larry asked me to keep it for him. So I put it in my safety deposit box in Duluth, kept it for about 10, 12 years. And then at some point he asked me to return it, which I did. But I listened to it, of course, and it was the first recording.
And so, and you and Bobby went to the winter dance party at the end of January 1959 at the Duluth Armory. Of course, a couple of days before the plane went down, and we lost the Big Bopper, Richie Valens, Buddy Holly, and some others. And first of all, in your book, your memory is similar to what Bob said at the Grammys when he said that Buddy Holly looked him right in the eyes, and they made that connection. And I know, of course, it's a tragedy that I can't even imagine what it was what it was like to even find out about. So I was wondering, but you did see one of his last shows, and I hear a lot about the aftermath. I don't hear a lot about the shows themselves. So do you remember? I mean, what do you remember about that whole show? I mean, do you remember any of the songs? Do you remember the MC? Do you remember what the whole place was like?
So what I do remember is that it was the wind chill temperature in Duluth that night was minus 44 degrees. Okay, that's part of the reason that Buddy ultimately died, because it was so cold in that part of the country that the bus that they had an old bus that would transport them from place to place, and I understand the heater in it didn't work well, and they were freezing on these buses. And so after they performed at Duluth, they had 2 more concerts, the second of which was in Iowa, and it was so cold. But he said, I can't go in this bus anymore. I'm freezing. And that's when he decided to charter a plane to take him to the next concert, which I believe was in Fargo, Moorhead. It was either Moorhead or Fargo, Minnesota, in the Dakotas, right on the border between Minnesota and North Dakota. And then, as it turns out, the weather was terrible, and the plane went down. So I remember all of that. The weather was I mean, January 31st, early February, to be in that part of the country, weather-wise, it's just really, very difficult. So, but inside the hall, the venue was called the Duluth National Guard Armory, and I think it was built in 1915, and many acts played there. It was one of the main venues in Duluth at that time. Over the years, you know, everybody played there, and there was 2,000 uh, young people in attendance that night. And I remember when we walked into the armory, we came in from the entrance was the opposite side of the stage, and you had to walk through the whole. It was a big room. You had to walk through the whole uh, room to get to the front. And Bobby and all these other, you know, when we got in there, there was music being played. I can't remember who was playing. You know, there's a whole bunch of people on the bill. You know, but and the guys and girls that are, you know, teeny boppers, they're all dancing. And we just kind of pushed our way through the crowd. And Bobby said, "We're going right to the stage." I said, "Okay." So he led the way, and he just pushed his way through the crowd, and I followed him. And we got right to the stage. There was nobody between us and the stage. We were touching the stage right at the spot where Buddy Holly was going to perform and did perform. As a matter of fact, I went back there uh, for a book event for my book, and I had a book event at a museum there, and they're doing a restoration of the armory. You know, they were going to tear it down, but there was such an uproar that they raised millions of dollars, and it became a national, you know, it's the word, designated a national register, so it couldn't be torn down.
Mm-hmm.
And they're restoring it in part because of that performance of Buddy Holly there, you know, 2 nights before he passed away, and the fact that Bobby Zimmerman Dylan was in the audience. You know, that's a big part of the uh, legend of that building. So they found out the guy who's in charge of the rest of that project heard I was coming to town. He contacted me. He asked me to come out there, and I did. He had a camera crew there, and I told the whole story about that night. You know what happened, where we were, and all that. And he had me show the exact spot where we stood, where Bobby stood, and they put a star on the floor there to show once the venue opens up again to show people where Bobby Zimmerman and Dylan stood that night.
That's cool.
It is cool.
Yeah, Bobby Zimmerman went off to college for a bit, and he joined a fraternity. And did they have those initiation things back in those days for fraternities? And do you know anything about it?
Yeah, well, he never, you know, he lived in the Sammy house. He kind of went through the motions. He never really joined. He never actually joined the fraternity, but he was there, and he went through some of that initiation stuff, but never joined. I think I talked in the book about a skit that he did there. Uh, give some insight to it.
Now, now, did Bobby Zimmerman ever give you an explanation of why he changed his name to Dylan?
No, I never asked him.
Anyway, as we talked a little bit before, you were at the University of Miami. You're finally in the sunshine, and then after your father passed, you took over the family business. And you talk about that in the book. But it was Bob's mother who seemed to be the social media maven of the day, communicating everything that you did to Bob and everything Bob did to you. Now, did she, being a Jewish mother, did she seem concerned about his health or anything? Did you get any concern? I mean, in the mid-60s, he was like kind of being very, you know, living life on the edge there. And I was wondering if she got any sense that she had concerns.
No, she was. What I got from her was her her motherly pride, all of a sudden, he was like on the cover of this and the cover of that and Carnegie Hall and, writing these songs that everybody couldn't believe. Yeah, there was a lot of Jewish motherly pride there.
Um, so in your book, you clear up some mysteries. Like I always wondered why Bob Dylan fell asleep when they were playing at that record release party. Falling asleep there when they were playing Joni Mitchell's Court and Spark. Can you talk about that in the book? And the other thing that if you can talk a little bit about is there was always this picture of Bob Dylan and Cher playing with the band at David Geffen's birthday party, and how that the whole story came about really tells you about what a mensch Bobby Zimmerman is.
Oh, he absolutely is, and I go into detail about how that happened, why, and how it played out in the book, so people can really get an insight to that. And he had great gratitude to David Geffen for his help in putting that putting that whole tour together. He's the one that brought in Bill Graham and more or less and put together him and the band. It was his idea, and he was a force, and Bob wanted to make sure he got recognized for
that. Now on that tour, you had the best seats in the house, sitting right next to Lee Von Helm's drum kit.
Yeah.
And by the way, I saw that tour. That's the thing that changed my perception of everything. I just saw it when I was on Long Island, and a friend of mine got me a ticket, and I didn't really even know that much about Bob Dylan, but my friend was a convert, and he really thought I should go. His friend's sister had an extra ticket. I got it, and it just changed everything. I wouldn't be talking to you today, I don't think, if I didn't go, because it was like, it's like that old Maxell ad when you're listening to music and the hair is blowing back, and you don't even know what happened. And so for the next few years, that's all I did was pretty much just collect his old records and try to catch up. And to me, it was a great tour. It got great reviews, and he seemed to be enjoying it. But when he talked about it later, he didn't seem to have the same view. And and of course, he talks about, he just says a lot of things, and and you can interpret him anything you want. But first of all, I think you would agree that the tour with the band was spectacular.
It was amazing. It was incredible. Yeah.
And but it seems like that. But it wasn't so much. I'm not sure. I don't think it was the music that he didn't necessarily like, but it was the way the jet setting from one place to another, and that's what led to the Rolling Thunder view of things, way of doing things. And Bob wanted you to promote the tour, and he said, if you can sell fish, you can sell tickets.
That's what he said. I was hesitant. I was very surprised when they asked me to do it. And I said, Bob, I've never produced a musical tour. I'm a fish guy. And then he threw that line at me, and he just kind of stayed on me until I agreed to do it. And the rest is history, as they say.
Now, I'm sure most people know who are listening to this or watching this, but Bob Dylan is just about the biggest music. I don't want to use the term rock star, but he's the biggest musician, most popular, well-respected guy, coming back after 8 years, and having #1 records, and just being just back on top. And then he decides to go on this little tour with Joan Baez and Roger McGuinn and all these, and Mick Ronson and all these people, and play small, like the Harvard Square Theater, and just these tiny places, and you get 2 days notice. And
well, remember, we opened the whole tour at the 1,700 seat Plymouth Memorial Auditorium in Plymouth, Mass. I mean, talk about an out of the way small town and venue. I mean, that personifies it.
Yeah, and yeah, I guess on some level tying into the bicentennial and all that was going on
Yeah,
at the
yeah.
time. And yeah, I lived on Long Island at the time, and there was the radio station WNEW-FM, and I have it on all the time, even when I was doing my homework, trying to figure out how I could see the Rolling Thunder Review, especially since I couldn't drive at night at that time. I was too young. And when it was the night of the hurricane, which was on my birthday, the week before, there was an advertisement in the New York Times, and my parents let me skip school and take the Long Island Railroad to Penn Station. And I got my 2 tickets and got on the train and came home. And again, if I, it, again, I don't know, I don't compare things, it's better than what the band, but they were just 2 of the most amazing events, I ever experienced. And
Yeah, they're amazing. You were fortunate to be able to get 2 tickets. How did you do that?
when I got there, I think the Garden was the only venue, and I got there at 9:45. They were supposed to go on sale at 10, but according to the people at the box office, there was such a long line. They put them on sale like at 1 in the morning. I got 2 tickets like on the last row on the side.
Okay, so you got there at the right time. Okay, good for you, because the tickets are really hard to come by.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I just use binoculars, whatever. But I, and a lot of that, those people, there's people I never saw. I'd been to only a handful of concerts. I mean, Dylan was the only person I'd seen before. I'd never seen Joni Mitchell or Roger McGuinn. Couldn't believe Muhammad Ali was there.
He was
Um,
there.
um, so this weekend or this Friday, I think, is when Martin Scorsese's Rolling Thunder Review film is coming out on Blu-ray. And anyone who's done any research at all knows that a lot of it's fictionalized, with actors playing parts and things being distorted. And it made it, for me, a very interesting film, and it's very Dylan-esque, but it certainly does not tell the real story. And it's kind of insulting to some of the real heroes of the tour. And I count you as being one of those people. And how did you feel about that film?
Yeah, when I saw it, you know, I'm watching it, and of course, first of all, I have to say that the performance footage in the documentary and Rolling Thunder is incredible, amazing footage. Of course, I was at every one of those concerts, and so I saw it all live. But to see it again, it just captures for everybody to see how amazing those performances were. But as the doc you know unwound, all of a sudden people are showing up in interviews claiming to be having been on the tour in this capacity and that capacity, and I said, well, they weren't there. I never saw that. That's not right, And I think that happened. I think they had 5 bogus people that claim to have been there, and for sure, I'll guarantee you that if Sharon Stone had been there, I would have remembered her. She wasn't there. None of them were there. But you know that's Bobby and Marty. They're creative sorts, and they decided to throw some fiction in there. For people who weren't part of the tour, I'm sure they had no way to know until they later read in the press that that was fictionalized and those people weren't really there. And I'm sure some people found that interesting. Some people might have, uh, not found it interesting. Because from my point of view, it took away from the opportunity to really have a pure vision and revision of Rolling Thunder, which was an amazing tour. And I know that there was a lot of other footage that was shot at the time that could have been used that would have been more representative of what happened than having used the time, to put in these bogus talking heads. So I wouldn't have done that. But, I'm not the creative genius that Bob is or Marty, so that's what they decided. But I personally, thought it should have been kept more pure and right to what really happened there.
Um, One thing that I did like, and I watched the movie again a couple days ago to refer. I saw it like 4 times the week it came out. I haven't seen it in whatever, a year and a half since. Um, but and especially considering what's going on in Washington and the world now, it's the juxtaposition of like that sort of phony patriotism, bicentennial stuff, and then a real artist like Dylan, and culminating with the Hurricane Carter and Hattie Carroll songs, and just showing why Dylan meant so much to so many people um, at so many points. But particularly right then, there was so much going on that didn't seem to be have uh, the resonance that Bob's music did. And he took his old music and brought it up to date, and he had the new songs like Hurricane, which dealt with things that all sorts of problems that are going on in America today.
That's true. That's true. Well, Bob has a way of reflecting, uh, America with the words and images that he puts together in his songs. So, and we're still going, obviously, through different but turbulent times. He had this album that came out recently, I think in June, that was very creative and interesting as well. Some of which I think could be reflecting these times.
Definitely, yeah. It's I have to even when I just it's like what you think of what came out last year, and you think Dylan, and then you have to really think like what else? What do you mean? What else came out? I mean, it just blew everything out of the water. It's just an insane, creative. Yeah, and he keeps on breaking through year after every few years he comes up with something, and it's like nothing like before. It's, that's why we love him. And one of the things that you talk about in the book is captured in the film is when you talk in great detail about the book about negotiating with Walter Yetnikoff, the president of Columbia Records, and they do show the footage or some of the footage in the movie. Well, first of all, when you went to see the movie, did you know anything about it when you went to go see it, or you just saw it?
No, I had no idea how they put the movie together until I saw it.
So it must have been was it weird seeing? Must have been kind of weird seeing all that stuff. Even seeing you, and not just the context, but even going back 45 years, or for what time, 44 years.
Yeah, it's 45 years. Yeah, no, I mean, all that stuff is vivid in my mind, and seeing it on the screen, it was exciting and enjoyable.
And one thing that so there was a second night of the Hurricane, which is at the Houston Astrodome, which is probably the biggest venue at the time. And that hasn't been very well chronicled. I know Ringo and Stephen Stills and all these people played. And what's also interesting, if you, which I'm sure you didn't, I'm probably the only person who did. If you look at the credits at the end when they have all the dates, they don't list that as a Rolling Thunder date. They just have the first leg and the second leg, but not the second night of the Hurricane. But anyway, so what comes to your mind at that gig? Because as I said, considering it was Bob Dylan, it was one of the biggest venues. It doesn't seem to be chronicled the way almost every other night was.
Well, that was a Night of the Hurricane event, which had a lot of performers on there, not including a bunch of the people we had on Rolling Thunder, but there was other people that came too. It was kind of a standalone. It wasn't a Rolling Thunder event. It was a Night of the Hurricane event that Bob helped support.
Oh, I see. So and then so let's move on to the last waltz. So not only did Bob Zimmerman show up, or I guess he showed up as Bob Dylan, but so did 300 Pounds of Your Salmon.
Yes.
Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Well, I became friendly with Bill Graham and Barry Emhoff on Tour 74 because they were the promoters on that. David Geffen brought him in. And so being that I was on the whole tour, I became very close with, well, friendly with them. And so Bill called me up, and he said, well, I had turned him on to my Lake Superior smoked trout, and he became kind of hooked on it. And I used to, he used to call and want to buy it. I wouldn't sell it to him, so we made a deal. When he wanted it, I'd send him that, and he would, in exchange for him getting me, concert tickets wherever I wanted to, and so he called me and he said, we're having this last waltz concert for the band. I was very friendly with the band guys because, for 6 weeks I was with them night and day, and he said, and it's going to be on Thanksgiving, and we're going to have a big feast for the whole, not only for the principals, but for the audience too. Everybody's going to have a Thanksgiving meal before the concert. And he said, I thought it'd be nice, in addition to the traditional turkey and all the side dishes that go with it, if we could have some fish there. He said, would you be willing to provide he knew I had Operation Alaska, Alaskan salmon. I said, sure. How much you need? He said, oh, about 300 pounds. I said, okay, I'll send down 300 pounds of Alaska King salmon. Yeah, I said, it's compliments of the boys from the North Country, Bobby and me. And that's how it came about.
And in your book, you discuss, Passover with Marlon Brando and Bob Dylan, and you being a catalyst for Dylan reconnecting to his Jewish roots in the early 1980s.
Yes. Well, first of all, the story about the Seder, I think, with Marlon and Bobby is really amazing. It was like being in a Fellini movie, that from my perspective, it was really quite amazing. And I go into quite a bit of detail in the book about that. A lot of people have found that very interesting and enjoyable reading. But yeah, then I was living with Bobby in a house that he had rented in the city in in the early 80s. And that was when he was studying the New Testament. And then I started studying the Torah, and I became Jewishly observant, Orthodox. And so there was a whole process there by by which eventually, I turned Bobby on to introduce him to very learned Orthodox rabbis, and he studied with them too. And it's all in the book.
Now, you are, I'm very jealous of a lot of things that happened in your life, but you got to hear Bob Dylan previewing either in person or recordings of like Forever Young, stuff from Blow the Tracks and Desire. And I'm hoping to go back to Tulsa, and I'm particularly fascinated by the Street Legal album, and like there were like piano demos and stuff. I don't know if you ever heard that stuff, but now back in now, were there times back in the 60s? I don't remember from the book, but now were you able to see him much in the 60s, or were you busy with your own life?
No, not in the 60s. We got back together in 72. Mm-hmm. And so from 72 on, I was involved with around when he was doing, a lot of things, musical things, and recordings and touring and all that, of course.
And of course, Bob was the best man at your wedding. And there are pictures in the book. There are a lot of great pictures in the book as well. And this is, by the way, I should hold it up. This is what the book looks like, people. And this is a bookmark, one with one of the first shows in Plymouth.
Yes.
And then with the night of the hurricane that I went to.
Yes.
So he was the best man at your wedding.
Yeah, and there's a picture of us in tuxedos there showing that. You
guys look good in tuxedos.
Thank you.
And in the early pages of the book, it mentions that Larry David was a neighbor.
Yeah, when I lived in the Palisades, Larry was a neighbor of mine for a while.
What was that like?
That was interesting. Yeah, he's Larry is a great guy and a real character, and it was enjoyable living next to him and becoming friends with him.
And you're in the, I can't remember what's the book or the website, but you're involved with some charities.
Yes.
The Aish HaTorah Discovery Program, and the founder of the Chabad of Pacific Palisades in California. Did you want to give a little plug for those?
Yeah. I turned my house into a Chabad house when I moved to Pacific Palisades, and then we built up a big community. Now there's a Chabad Pacific Palisades has a 2.5 acre campus on Sunset Boulevard, a block from Pacific Coast Highway. It's got a school, it's got a camp, it's got all kinds of services and functions. So, and I've stayed involved with it the whole time. I go there every Sunday for morning services, and I'm very close to them. And so I get a lot of satisfaction. I planted the seeds, and now for just a little tree, and now it's a big orchard. It's a good feeling. And this and Aish HaTorah is also international Jewish organization with facilities all over the world as well. And I was the original sponsor for their discovery program, which 500,000 people have gone through. And it's affected a lot of lives. So those are two of my, that and my children are three of my most, and Rolling Thunder too, are the things that a lot of satisfaction from those involvements and accomplishments.
And just when you buy the book, he does tell your philosophies about charity and so on were very moving, I thought. So in closing, you can buy a copy of Dylan and Me at the official website or on Amazon or probably any of the major booksellers, and I'll put a link on the page that goes with this. You can learn how Mr. Kemp kept Joni Mitchell in jail. Bob Dylan's very public response to a Sam Shepard play. Anyway, so thank you, Mr. Kemp.
Also, when I had a food fight with Joan Baez in a Chinese restaurant in Duluth.
Yes. So there are plenty of great stories. It's all a lot of great insight. Very fun read. It's I highly recommend it. And if you care about finding anything about what Bob Dylan is really like, this is good a starting point as any. So thank you, and for sharing your time, and thanks for being on the Boston Herald podcast.
My pleasure, Harold. Thank you for having me.